Today we are ranking every single weapon in Apex Legends. This means what guns that you want to avoid and what weapons that you should be on the lookout for if you do want that competitive edge. Much like the Legend tier list I previously posted, there are really no D tier weapons in Apex Legends, which I would consider to be poor. Frankly, if there is one thing that Respawn does get right, it is the amount of useful weapons and legends in Apex. This does mean we start with the C tier of weapons, which are the okay and fine weapons. Taking the bottom spot is going to be the P2020, but with a small disclaimer, hammer points are back in the game, and if you do get these, you can bump the P20 up to C+, but otherwise, the P2020 is really just your typical transfer weapon. You grab it if you have nothing else, and maybe it will store your light ammo attachments. That being said, the P2020 is actually a little underrated, even though it is at the bottom of my weapon tier list. The time to kill is nothing special, but its damage per mag is actually pretty good. The big thing is that for a secondary, you need a fast killing gun, or at minimum, something that you know when you swap to it, it is going to have the best chance at finishing off that enemy. Also, and I don't know if you've experienced it, but hammer points are incredibly difficult to find right now. Much like the P20, we have the Mozambique narrowly edging out the little pistol at C+. Similarly, it does have that disclaimer. However, I do think the Mozambique with hammers does give it a much bigger boost than the P20, and I do put the Mozambique at B+ if you do have the hammer point rounds. The Mozambique is also extremely underrated as it has incredible range to do a full 45 or 60 hit up to and exceeding 40 meters away. This means if you are accurate, you can easily do over 100 damage in just a few shots from very far. I prefer the Beak as well because what I want most in the secondary is for it to hit as high as possible, so I am not forced to fire multiple rounds to again defeat my enemies. That being said, most of the other shotguns are simply just better in overall DPS and have a higher damage per hit, and for overall utility, I would still take most other guns as a secondary over this little shotgun pistol. We round out the C tier of weapons with surprisingly the Devotion at C+. Don't get me wrong, the Devo can be very good at times, but it just underperforms in so many scenarios. Its recoil is pretty high, the range is not great, and even the damage is not what it once was. It almost feels as if it has to have a turbocharger for it to be competitive as well. I think another big problem is that if you do want to run an energy weapon, I would just take the Nemesis as it outclasses the Devo in nearly everything. Really, the only time the Devotion is going to work at its maximum effectiveness is when you are really close to enemies and you do have it be fully kitted. If it does not have all these variables, you're simply just better taking one of the other energy guns. It simply outclasses the previous weapons because it does have a good time to kill when it is spinning up, and of course, a nice damage per mag if you can make use of it. At B tier, we do have the weapons that are decent and overall good if used in their appropriate ranges or environments. I debated heavily between C+ or B, but I decided to slide the L-Star into the bottom of B tier. If you followed me for a while, I do like to hammer the L-Star pretty hard as a bad gun, mostly as a joke, but in reality, the L-Star is actually just fine. Just note that it doesn't really do anything special in terms of its killing power. It lacks the time to kill that many of its competitor assault rifles have. It also lacks range, and in general, magazine size, as you do have to stop shooting it if you do want that cooldown to not trigger. Because of these factors, it is a fairly weak weapon, but if you do have a good hand for shooting the weapon without reloading, it actually can be pretty surprising at times. Overall, I can't recommend the L-Star compared to many of the other weapons, and I would just look past it. Back to back energy guns, we now have the Triple Take also in B tier. The Triple Take for me is the weakest of the poking weapons that you can use. It used to be literally broken, but a handful of nerfs have made it falter over time. That being said, the Triple Take is a very low skill ceiling gun, as you do have that 3 pellet spread. This does mean that even if you connect one of those 3 pellets, you are softening enemies up, and it is enough to force them to shield cell. I think if you are playing ranked, it can have some hybrid poking power and even close range shotgun-esque power, but much like the L-Star, there are so many other options in the game that do similar things that are just better at all categories than this marksman weapon. The pellet spread also makes it capped in terms of how far you can shoot it, which is also unfortunate, and it makes headshots from something like a longbow, 30-30, maybe even a G7, way more lethal due to their precision power. If you do want to farm damage and want to be able to hit people with minimal effort, then definitely look at the Triple Take. Not the most competitive SMG at the top of the game, but one that definitely shines is the Alternator. Like the Beak and the P20, the Alternator also has a disclaimer as truly, it's an amazing weapon right off the drop, and I even give it the A+ rating if you do find it as the first weapon that you find. The reason it has some viability is because it's very easy to use, little to no recoil, and a great base magazine size and damage that makes it shred enemies with gray shields. For the bad though, it's mega weak in terms of its time to kill for an SMG, which is a problem when many enemies enemies have higher rarity shields, or you are going up against basically all assault rifles and SMGs. Overall, the alternator isn't bad, but it is simply just outclassed by others. If you do struggle with recoil and you want some hybrid play between the close to longer ranges and you want that SMG kind of handling, then definitely pick it up. Moving into B+, we start with the Sentinel Sniper Rifle. We yet again have a disclaimer in the fact that if you do get a gold armor, the Sentinel for me is more of an A weapon. Previously, the Sentinel would chunk into your shield cells pretty fast if you kept charging it and you did not have the gold armor. With the buff to the Sentinel where it only costs 1 cell now, this definitely helps you not eat up your oh so valuable shields, and if you do get the gold armor, it is now free to charge it. That being said, it lacks a little bit in terms of its stopping power to really get more knocks at range, unless you do hit consecutive shots, and if you do have to shoot it more than once, I would rather use something like a G7 or a longbow. The fun factor on this gun is insane though. It is a blast to use, and I almost find if you can use it in close range a little bit more with effectiveness, you're gonna obliterate your opponents, and because of this, the Sentinel does have a pretty high skill ceiling. Overall though, I just wish it did a little bit more damage so you could pick it up and not have to shoot enemies twice to get a knock. Second to the Sentinel is the Charge Rifle. I give the Charge Rifle a leg up because it is a little bit better at creating constant pressure. Not to mention, the hit scan nature of the Charge allows you to effortlessly tag enemies and level up both your own and your squad's Evo shields. If you are playing a slower paced ranked match with a more defensive type legend, the Charge is absolutely something that you should look at to really farm a ton of damage. The Charge does not have the same stopping power as say the Sentinel, so getting knocked might be a little hard, but overall, the annoying nature of the gun and the simplicity and ease of use of it makes it extremely frustrating to get hit by it, and you're gonna wear down your enemies if you do use it. It is also worth stating that the reload is very long. 5.1 seconds if you do reload from an empty mag with no stock is quite hefty, and this can create some problems if you are trying to apply pressure on a team that is closer to you. The second shotgun for my list is going to be the Mastiff at B+. The Mastiff has a couple things going for it, but first, the negatives. It does not really do anything overly competitively. It lacks very close range stopping power that the EVA 8 has, and also lacks the hard-hitting one-tap potential of the Peacekeeper. The pellet spread of having 2 outside pellets also makes it more times than not cap your overall damage unless you are very close to enemies, and at this point, the EVA 8 or the Peacekeeper might still just be better. The big thing, and it is a huge thing, that the Mastiff does have working for it is the ability to reload singular rounds at a time. Reloading one round means you can have much more consistent or constant flow of damage, as you don't have to fully reload every time to finish off an enemy, and this can greatly help in environments where there are a lot of enemies around and you can't reload a full mag. The Stiff also has a horizontal pellet pattern, which is a negative on its own, but it's also positive as it does mean it's very easy to connect partial hits in there. So if you want a shotgun that does lack some accuracy, but you are going to have a very easy to use one, it's not bad for this. Overall, the Mastiff is good, but I just don't think it's as good as the other ones, and it's been a while since it has been extremely on top of the game. Capping off our B tier is going to be the Spitfire at B+, which may be surprising to some. Starting with the good though, this Spitfire is the gun if you want to take on multiple enemies at once and you are looking to absolutely mow them over. 50 rounds in a level 3 mag is absurd, and it means the total damage output per mag is 900 damage to the body, which is so good. This is kind of where the good ends though for the Spitfire. It completely lacks DPS, and overall the handling is slow since it is an LMG. It's never going to be competitive with an assault rifle in terms of its time to kill, which is understandable as it really shouldn't be since it does have a huge mag. If you can properly apply pressure, then you will be good to go, but if anyone does get too close to you, you're gonna find that this thing does struggle greatly, and hopefully you do have an SMG to then kick in and make yourself more competitive again. The Spitfire is definitely solid, but it's been a couple years since it really went crazy. We are now moving on to the weapons that are amazing and incredible at A tier, but first, be sure to hop into my community Discord so you never have to play with randoms. I know that sucks. I'm also fairly active in there, so you can chat with myself and ask me any questions that you might have. We begin with one of the most misunderstood weapons in the game, and it is the Havoc Assault Rifle. I used to rate the Havoc a little higher if you could get a turbocharger, but since the turbocharger does reduce the damage, I am leaving the Havoc at a straight A tier. Regardless of whether or not you have that turbo, the Havoc does have a ton ton of recoil. Because of this, it does falter at range unless you are extremely proficient in controlling it. The Havoc should be considered more like an SMG as it does shred in the close range, and I always like to compare it more to those SMGs and assault rifles. But that being said, it is an assault rifle, so you are not getting the perks of an SMG of that increased speed and handling, and that hipfire from assault rifles were nerfed this season, which does hurt it a little bit more. That being said, 36 rounds and a level 3 mag from an assault rifle that kind of acts like an SMG is so good, and there's very few guns that are better when it comes to taking on multiple enemies at once in close range. Our first upper tier poking weapon is going to be the 30-30 repeater. The 30 continually seems to perform fairly well as a weapon that you do want to use to farm up damage, and it can be pretty deadly if you are rocking a skull piercer and hitting a few consecutive shots. This gun, more so than the others, is really great for consistent damage output since you do reload 2 rounds at once, which does mean less downtime and more time spent actually shooting at enemies and applying pressure. The damage isn't going to necessarily wow you at times, but the consistency of the gun does make it a very good ranked option, and I would consider it if you do want to level the squad's evo shields and you are looking to split ammo types from your teammates because maybe they are running something like light or energy ammo. I will say that the 30-30 does require you to be in a very specific range. If it's too close to enemies, I find that it doesn't work too well. And if enemies are too far, it's a little bit too hard to hit them as you do have to lead them. But overall, the 30-30 is a pretty solid weapon that is worthy of you using. At the same tier, but slightly edging out the repeater for me, is going to be the longbow sniper rifle. Personally, I enjoy the overall feel of the longbow, knowing that I don't need to charge it up to get full damage, and since it is a sniper, you are going to have larger headshot damage, which does mean more crippling power and capability. A body heady from a longbow is usually enough to knock or near knock most enemies if you do have that skull piercer. While I don't love the sniper scopes, you also have the added flexibility to throw a 4 to 8 times scope on there and really decimate enemies at all ranges. Overall, the longbow is a very solid long to mid-range poking weapon that can also be great iron-sighted up close and close-range tap-firing enemies like a true gaming warlord. The longbow, I think, continues to be slept on, so definitely use it if you haven't been using it in a while or you are looking to farm some 4Ks. Our final straight A tier weapon is going to be the Rampage LMG, and like a few weapons before it, it can be considered an A+ weapon if you do have it thermited or charged up. The biggest reason why you do want to use that Rampage is its slower shooting feel. The slower paced RPM allows for a very easy to control weapon that can decimate really at both mid to even long ranges, and it does allow you to farm damage quite nicely. And of course, if you do have it thermited or charged up, it is not too bad in the close range as well. My favorite part of thermiting though is really that it isn't the damage, it's rather the utility to burst through doors and play a little bit more creatively. The big problem though is its reliance on being charged up for it to actually be a competitive weapon in terms of its time to kill, and even then it's actually still a little bit lower. This means you need to have bag space for thermites, and you will have to make compromises that frankly aren't really worth its slower time to kill, or at least in my opinion. If you want what I think is the best overall LMG and you like to use machine guns, then this is probably the one. We have a lot of guns at A+, which for me are those weapons that are borderline must use in Apex Legends, but even if they aren't quite in S tier, they are incredible. Depending on how you are playing, they could easily fit up there. The first is my preferred long-range to mid-range tap-firing gun, and it is the G7 Scout. The G7 Scout is absolutely wild at just being able to literally poke everything from anywhere. Its base mag of 10 is fairly decent, but all it takes is a gray mag to instantly boost its total mag size up by 50%, which is quite nice. The double tap is kind of love it or hate it, but I encourage everyone to learn it and love it because it does boost the overall damage output, and a quick double tap, double heady can drop enemies so fast that they don't even know what's happening. If there's anything that falters with the G7, I do think it really needs an optic for some reason, and it could just be me, but I cannot hit anything if it does have iron sights. But overall, the G7 is insane, and it is worthy of picking up. The Prowler SMG also slots itself into A+, as it does have a lot of ways to make really quick work of multiple enemies. The Prowler shines with the level 3 mag, as that 35 round mag can be crazy at a total damage per 525 per mag. The Prowler's 5 round burst, however, does struggle quite a bit with no magazine, and I find its forgiveness to be very poor if you do miss any bursts with no mag. Likewise, it's just not a weapon everyone is going to enjoy using because it is a burst weapon. As soon as you do get any mag on it though, it really becomes a whole new weapon, and it can even excel as a run and gun hipfire weapon that frankly everyone needs to be using just a little bit more. It may not be as popular as say the R99 or the Car SMG, but it definitely can give both of those guns a run for their money. If there's any weapon in Apex that I feel like is a love it or hate it though, it is probably the EVA 8. That being said, the EVA 8 is absolutely a great weapon everyone needs to take a look at as their premier secondary. It lacks the punch of a Peacekeeper, but that fire rate an EVA can produce lets you eliminate entire squads with blazing fast speeds. There are very few guns that can drop 2 purple shielded enemies as fast as an EVA 8 can without even needing to reload. The EVA 8 for me is the shotgun to use if you are looking to fight with your squad in a pure 3-on-3 and just fully going after one another. The only thing that the EVA does lack for me is its potential to finish your enemies as fast as possible, as it isn't the hardest hitting with a singular trigger pull. It's also worth stating that if you are using a double tap, you have more burst DPS, but you're actually reducing how fast you can empty the mag, and thus you are slowing your total damage output if you do use the double tap. If you are not a fan of the EVA, you are more than likely a fan of the Peacekeeper, and while I do think the PK slightly edges out the EVA 8, they are ranked in a similar tier. The Peacekeeper is going to assure you that you have the greatest chance to finish your enemies if you do get them weak with your primary weapon, and you do need a swap to it. Because of this, the PK is really that premier secondary if you are looking to take more one-on-one battles, or maybe you are going in solo squads. There is a little more playability with the Peacekeeper as well, seeing as you can aim down sights and get that choke to activate. This is going to let you have much more range than the EVA or the Mastiff, and it is going to let you get fairly chunky hits up to 15 to 20 meters away at times. This will allow you to really play in an aggressive nature, and it's going to let you have more flexibility when it comes to your engagements. It won't be the fastest killing weapon in a straight fight, but it's definitely worth using as a backup to your primary assault rifle or even SMG. Ever since the Kraber had a nerf a few seasons ago, even a year ago, I have considered it an A+ gun, and this remains true today. While the Kraber is that weapon that gives you the best shot at one-tapping your enemies down, there are too many scenarios of shield rarity with the proper combined helmet that does allow enemies to live even if they do take a shot to the face. The Kraber is definitely still amazing, but its limited ammo can also be a liability if you do pick it up too early and you need to swap weapons in late game. If you want the best sniper in the game, of course this is going to be it for you. Definitely don't underestimate its ability to exhaust enemies' healing items as well, because getting hit for 140 pretty much instantly means you gotta pop a medkit, and you do have to pop a battery. Our final Apex weapon is going to be the Bocek Compound Bow. The Bocek is a very good weapon, and it does come with enough rounds for you to really be able to use it for the majority of a game, as long as you aren't being wasteful with it. I do think that the Shatter Caps is a nice perk on the weapon, and it does give you some very last-minute flexibility in a close-range fight, but I do think it's kind of just an afterthought overall. The power of the bow really lies in those full hits at range, which makes it very difficult for enemies to deal with. It almost has a slightly silent shot feature or element to it, which is interesting that you can be getting poked by it, and it's really hard to identify where the enemy is shooting you from. The bow is definitely good though. If you aren't using it and you just bypass it all the time, I think you should probably reconsider. Next up are the weapons that are on the top of the meta in Apex Legends and are the guns that you should consider to use if you want the best chances at winning your gunfights. First though, if you are enjoying or if you do think that we need some more interesting and cool weapons in Apex, hit that like button. I appreciate the support. We begin with the Wingman Sniper Rifle. Pistol. If you want a weapon that can be one of the most useful weapons in the game, the Wingman is absolutely it. Well-skilled players can extend its range way beyond the typical close-range pistol aspect that the gun has, and it will allow you to poke enemies with extreme power. All this in a pistol, though, means you get the benefits of that reload, handling, and of course the close-range power to obliterate your enemies. In some sense, this makes the Wingman almost like a better shotgun that you can carry to have a lot more usefulness. It's not going to be an easy weapon to use, and if you are whiffing shots at close range, you are dramatically reducing your time to kill, and it does make this pistol very unforgiving. That being said, everyone should learn how to use this thing, as it is instantly a great gun as soon as you do pick it up off the ground. A weapon that is absolutely being overshadowed and forgotten at the moment is going to be the Volt SMG. The Volt still remains on top when it comes to its pure ability to kill enemies. Its time to kill is very good, comparable to both the R301 and Flatline, while also being in the form factor of an SMG means you have that increased handling and speed of that. Its low recoil makes it easy to use at range, and you can even throw 2x optic on it if you do want that flexibility. Something that I don't often see brought up though is just how fast the Volt can reload. A purple stock will let you reload in just 1.3 seconds, which is honestly just absurd. And overall, the Volt is great even straight off the pickup with its 19 round base. Just because it's a crafting weapon in the first half of the season doesn't mean it's not worth taking the time to get it. A weapon that has fallen from my top spot this season for the first time in a super long time is going to be the R301, but it was probably about time we did get a little bit of a meta shakeup in the assault rifle category at least. The damage per second of that R301 did drop down enough to make it the slower killing of the three we are going to talk about, the R301, Flatline, Flatline and Nemesis, that is, but it's still a really great weapon. Its low recoil makes it so easy to use, which again probably makes it fair to get that nerf, as its skill to reward ratio was pretty crazy to the point where you could say it was being abused. The damage per mag actually is not that great though, and even the reload is just fine. Unlike the Volt and a few others, I do think the R301 needs some attachments to actually make it good, specifically a magazine, as typically you'll want to use the R301 from range, and having that low damage and no mag can make it tough to get one mags. Not really a lot to say about the 301. It's a great gun. It has been great ever since Apex released, and it is that typical assault rifle that everyone and anyone should be able to use. The R3 might have gotten a nerf, but this does leave some room for other weapons, and specifically, this is going to be the Flatline. Prior to the season, the Flatline has always been competitive with the R301. With the slight changes, I do think significantly makes the Flatline the better option. It has a better DPS, better base mag, better level 3 mag size, and a bigger damage per mag for both of those magazines. The only thing is, it does require more skill to make use of it, since it does bounce around a lot more than that R301, but everyone should learn how to use the Flatline. I think a bonus to the Flatline over the R3 specifically is that it does shoot slower, meaning you won't need as many rounds to do the same amount of damage per mag, and thus you can hold more healing items or grenades in your bag if you are playing efficiently. The Flatline has always been a top contender, but if you are now looking for that competitive edge, definitely use it. Next up is going to be the Car SMG, which did have a 1 bullet nerf at the base mag, and this with a few other things have made it not be a top SMG in the game, but it is right there, similar to the R301 if you do want to compare it to this. The Car though is still one of the fastest killing SMGs in the game with a DPS of 202, but really that power comes from the flexibility of either magazine type and ammo type. You won't always be able to get that optimal mag or ammo, and being able to switch is very crucial when it comes to something like ranked, where you are not going to get the best gear at all times. Having the ability to select either magazine means increased killing potential sooner, and thus you're going to be more likely to win your fights. More on the Car in a little bit, but just know it's still a must pick if you do see it. Not going to go into it too much, but the Hemlock is the final straight S tier weapon before we do get to the S plus and God tier guns. The Hemlock in the care package is kind of just absurd. A near 40 round mag after that boosted loader goes off is crazy. Get some headshots in there and you can 2-burst enemies with blazing fast speeds. The Hemlock in single shot has also always been great to increase its versatility to be useful at all ranges. I haven't been seeing too much of them in the care package though, so if you do find one, it might be worth grabbing if you are near the end game and you aren't going to need to worry about running out of ammo. We now have 2 weapons coming in at S plus and a singular weapon in God tier, which I deem the best gun in the game. If you can use either of these guns or even 2 of them together, you will absolutely be set for basically everything Apex has to offer. The first is going to be the brand new Nemesis Burst Assault Rifle, which arguably is the best gun in the game right now for all around use at most ranges. The DPS of this gun starts off at 180, similar to the Flatline, but then goes all the way up to 196, meaning even if the gun is not charged up from shooting consecutive shots, it has crazy DPS. On top of this, a base mag of 20 is pretty good, but that 32 round for a purple mag is excellent, and it's going to allow you to deal a serious amount of damage per mag that also comes very close to the time to kill of some of the fastest killing SMGs in the game. The one thing that the Nemesis does falter in is that you can't per se beam at mega long ranges, but this does come down to the player's skill, and this probably is understandable. The Nemesis is absolutely absurd right now. I am expecting a nerf of the fire rate between bursts, or at least something a little bit to counter it. Overall though, I'd expect this gun to stick around, and I don't see them nerfing it so hard that it does become unusable. The best, fastest killing floor loot weapon that you can get this season is going to once again be the R99 SMG. Oddly enough, it has been 6 seasons since the R99 reigned supreme, as the Car SMG has been killing it since its introduction, but the R9 getting a 1 damage buff in conjunction with the Car SMG's 1 bullet nerf at its base is enough to make the R9 shred once again. The total DPS is 216 versus the Car's 202, and the damage per mag is very comparable now that it is only different by a handful of damage. Because of this, both weapons are honestly great off the drop, but the R99 now is that faster killing gun that everyone needs to consider. Not to mention, the recoil on the R9 is just easier to control, and I think most players will have better success with the R99 over that Car SMG, but again, they both are pretty crazy. If you made it this far, drop a big W or smiley in the comments. The definitive best gun this season that should be an instant pickup is going to be the RE45, and for a lot of reasons. While hitting flesh, The RE45's DPS is an absurd 234, outclassing both the CAR and R99. Even against shields, it's still going to be doing 182. This sounds bad, but truly, the RE is that gun that you're going to want to swap to after you get an enemy weak anyway. And even if you average in enemies half shields and then half health damage, the TTK is very comparable to those SMGs. So if you have to go into a fight just maining that RE45, you are more than likely going to be fine. And if this is not enough, you get all those crazy high damage perks packed into the form factor of a pistol, which means blazing fast handling and strafing speeds. The RE45 is the best gun in the game, and I would expect it to leave the care package at the end of the season, so definitely make use of it while it is in there. Your game doesn't end with the best weapons in Apex though. Be sure to check out this video for the best legends, hit that like button, subscribe for more. I'll see you in the next one.